For our top story this hour, we are following reports concerning the future of Julian Assange. Thanks to a copy and paste error made by the U.S. Justice Department in a Virginia court filing, we are learning the U.S. government is preparing to prosecute the WikiLeaks founder. The mistake, which included Assange's name in an unrelated case in the state's Eastern District, reveals the existence of a sealed indictment against Assange. The Wall Street Journal now reports the U.S. government is, quote, increasingly optimistic it will be able to get Assange into a U.S. courtroom. The claims are based on conversations with sources in Washington, quote, familiar with the matter. The revelations appear to confirm what many Assange supporters have feared all along. See, Assange is currently trapped inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London due to a warrant out for his arrest in the UK over bail violation charges. While that charge could lead to at most 2 years in prison, many have suspected that once in UK custody, Assange could be turned over to the United States. Over the summer, I spoke with political satirist and civil rights activist Randy Credico, who described the possibility that a secret indictment is being prepared for Assange.
They could cook up an indictment and move the rules around, and where U.S. Protections under the First Amendment wouldn't apply to foreigners. It would be the same during the Roman Empire. The laws of Rome didn't apply to their empire. They can find ways to circumvent the letter and the spirit of the First Amendment, and obviously they want to quiet him down.
According to the Wall Street Journal's latest report, quote, the exact charges Justice Department might bring against Assange remain unclear, but they may involve the Espionage Act, which criminalizes the disclosure of national defense-related information. Meanwhile, earlier this month, Assange's mother, Christine, released this desperate plea for her son's life.
The UK-US extradition treaty allows for the UK to extradite Julian to the US without a prima facie case. Once in the US, the National Defence Authorisation Act allows for indefinite detention without trial. Julian could very well be held in Guantanamo Bay and tortured, sentenced to 45 years in a maximum security prison, or face the death penalty. My son is in critical danger because of a brutal political persecution by the bullies in power whose crimes and corruption he has courageously exposed when he was editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks.
With the future of Assange in question, we turn now to former UK MP George Galloway. George, the ACLU has already condemned this potential move by the U.S. government, saying any prosecution of Assange would set a terrible precedent for American journalists. What do you fear would come from this kind of trial?
Well, in a sane world, liberals and progressives and journalists of all kinds would be up in arms about this. But I'm not hearing already any of that anger and ire. I'm almost speechless having heard Mrs. Assange there talking about the persecution of Julian, who sits in a small cell not 1 mile from here, outside the window of which I frequently find myself. It is unspeakable, utterly despicable, that this man has been persecuted for revealing more truth to power and about power than the entire White House press corps put together. And yet we were all dragooned in defense of Jim Ancona of CNN not a week ago, yet not a whimper so far has been heard from them about one of their own fellows who's being persecuted just for reporting the truth. By the way, not a single retraction, not a single error has been made by WikiLeaks. In the same period, the other journalists, other organs of the mass media have made hundreds of errors, some of them willful.
It's hard to imagine how Mr. Assange would be transferred into U.S. custody without the cooperation of Ecuador's government led by Lenin Moreno. Why do you believe Moreno has betrayed the legacy of his predecessor, Rafael Correa?
Well, I'm sure that he's been bribed, browbeaten and bullied by the United States into collaborating with them. That won't be necessary in the United Kingdom, whose collaboration would also be required in any extradition, because we do it for free. And as Julian's mother just said, under our one-sided extradition treaty, you don't even have to show just cause. You don't even have to produce a prima facie case. You just ask for his extradition, and hey presto, you're gone. So you can be sure if this government continues in power, they'll send Assange to face the music, and the music will be condign, to say the least. By the way, Pompeo used to post on his Twitter feed some of the revelations that Julian Assange made. The New York Times used to publish it on their front page, as did the Washington Post and many other august journals. How come they're not being prosecuted, whilst the source of these truths is apparently already the subject of a sealed indictment?
Why do you believe these outlets, though, as you point out, which collaborated with WikiLeaks to release some of these files, aren't being more vocal in their support for the WikiLeaks founder? And what do you think people, average citizens who care about Assange and believe he shouldn't be targeted in this way, can do now?
Because the Liberals have gone into bed with the deep state in the United States, such as their hatred of Trump and of Russia, such as their bizarre love affair with Hillary Clinton. They somehow blame Julian Assange for the fact that the Democrats chose as their candidate the only candidate in America that could possibly have lost the election to Donald Trump. And so the confluence of all these events has left Julian almost friendless. I know that because I've spent years trying to recruit people who would normally be lined up on any free speech, freedom of expression cases into speaking up for Julian Assange. Iceland deported FBI men by the plane load when they were trying to frame Julian in Iceland. They did succeed for a time in framing him in Sweden, and I'm sure that the indictment they've got will have been the product of the same kind of dirty tricks.
We're going to leave it there for now. Former UK MP George Galloway, thank you so much for joining us today.